Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and once again I'm joined by Paul Lamb for the Celtic Matchworn Jersey podcast. Paul, how are you?
Not bad, Paul. Good to be back on.
It's always a pleasure to hear from you, and you've already furnished me with 4 Matchworn jerseys from your collection from various different eras, 2 home and 2 away, Paul. The response to the podcast so far has been very positive, and there's match-worn collectors from all over the place, isn't there? It's not just Celtic fans that are interested in a subject such as this, Paul.
No, it's worldwide. You know, it's one of the good things I've really enjoyed about it. You know, made contact with people in the Far East and South America, you name it. You know, it's incredible. It
is. You think it's a niche market, but there's collectors all over the place. And the jerseys that you've selected today, we have some classics, some that'll probably divide opinion, and then a couple from the same season that were modern day classics, I would suggest. So let's run through them. The first one that you've chosen is the home jersey that was introduced in 1979, and we wore it until 1982. It's the green and white hoops, Paul. Talk to us about the design of that jersey, first of all.
For a lot of people, that's the quintessential hoops for them. You know, it's their favourite. It's that classic V-neck, plain white with the just evenly spaced hoops all the way through it, and the large crest embroidered onto it. It's just a classic look. It
is a classic, and like you say, I think when you're looking through the hoops as a collection, and I say the modern day, we're going way back now, right enough. This was a jersey that we wore after the 10 men won the league jersey. We continue to wear the one with the floppy collar and the crest in the middle, right up to the European Cup second round of the following season. So it was worn right up to October 79, and then we introduced this V-neck, and it was a big, thick, white V-neck with the hoops, 6 green hoops. A mutual friend who was involved in supplying jerseys for the book has a long-sleeved edition of this, and it just looks absolutely class, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a cracker. This one particularly that I've got is quite unique as well, and it's the first introduction of polyester to the shirts and not the traditional cotton.
Now, that's an interesting point, because when we were going through the legendary collection of Neely Mockin, this jersey was produced in cotton and also in polyester, so you're quite right, it was the first introduction of the polyester jersey, but when we first started wearing it, we also had the cotton one. So there are 2 separate jerseys for the collectors out there. There's a third one that I think I've shared images with you, and it's a prototype. So you've got the V-neck, and they had the crest dead centre. I think you've probably seen images of that, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm sure I remember you sending me before.
There's a good picture actually of George McCluskey and Willie McStay, and they're wearing the new kits that have been introduced. There's a third Celtic player in that picture. I'm going to say it's Danny Craney, and it's the home jersey is actually the one with the crest in the centre, but it obviously was never utilised. It was never worn in a competitive game. But they prototype jerseys are out there. On the subject of prototypes, Paul, how many have you actually seen down the years?
There's been quite a few, some absolute horrendous ones. I remember seeing some a few years ago when they were looking at changing manufacturers, and you'll have seen the images of the Gola prototypes.
That's terrible.
They were just horrendous.
It was terrible, because it was almost like a zigzag style hoop. It was like static, wasn't it? Oh, terrible. And there was a similar jersey out at that time. I can't remember which team it was, but it was black and red hoops, and it was a horrific jersey. And to see the Celtic green and white hoops on that design, it was absolutely no surprise that we didn't go with Gola. The reason I ask is, even when, for example, the People's Ford jerseys came out, there were a number of prototypes made up, and I got that information when I was speaking to Brian Gilder, who was the sponsor at the time. And he was obviously looking through these jerseys with Terry Cassidy before a decision was made. The unfortunate thing about the People's Ford home jersey is it's actually quite a nice kit. if it wasn't for the red, white and blue along the sponsor. There is the flash of a diamond on the sleeve, which was very much in the great 90s kind of style. But as a jersey, it was pretty smart. This one with the V-neck, another story attached to this is, you know, the famous friendly match against Orlando Lions in 1988 when they came over for a friendly. I think it was played midweek at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There was only a couple of thousand Celtic fans at the game. And Celtic were still wearing their centenary kits at that time, right? Because obviously they wore them, as you know, for a couple of seasons, the home jerseys. And at some point, be that before the game or during the first half, Neely Mockin got wind of the fact that the Orlando Lions guys would like to change, you know, swap shirts at the end of the game. And because back then it wasn't a case of having a never-ending supply of Umbro jerseys, Neely Mockin knew that he couldn't give any more jerseys away. And so he got the players to change into old strips at half-time. And so you've got pictures of Alex Matthew running about with this 1979 jersey on in 1988 in the second half of that game, which just kind of shows you the nature of how things were back then, Paul.
Yep.
I think when you look at this jersey as well, it sparks off some memories of some of the games it was played in. You think of the Hampden Riot Scottish Cup final, this jersey was worn that day, and also when we played Real Madrid at Celtic Park, European Cup quarter-final in 1980 when Johnny Doyle and George McCluskey scored. This again was the jersey. It's simple in its style, it's classy, and to be honest with you, I mean, if Adidas were to use this as a template and then modernise it, it would be an incredible design.
Oh, definitely,
Now, the jersey that you have, could you tell me how you were able to locate and purchase this one? Because it is fairly rare.
This one came via a friend of mine who got it from someone in Holland. It was believed to have been worn in one of the pre-season friendly games at the beginning of the 82-83 season. They played a couple of games against Feyenoord and they were still wearing this strip, and it wasn't until the following week when they came back, I think they played a League Cup game, and that's when they wore the new 82-84 home strip. So this one must have been a swap shirt that ended up staying over there and eventually found its way back here. Usually with just the plain hoops, there's no number on the back, so there's no way of identifying which player would have worn it.
You know, the thing that I probably took for granted when I started doing the book, Paul, was I thought it was a case of, and I know that the previous books that have been published by the same publisher on Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur, a massive part of the collection came from the clubs. And I thought that when you do a book like this, the first port of call would be you go to Celtic and they'll have this incredible archive of jerseys all stored away.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that's not the case. And I've had that discussion with quite a few people because it did surprise me, Paul. I would have thought that archiving materials such as match programmes, pennants from big games, as well as trophies obviously, and jerseys, copies of the Celtic View, meeting minutes from board meetings, all that kind of thing, contracts, that would have all been archived. I would have thought, that was just the image I had in my mind, but we actually know that that's not the case, and a lot of these things have, like the jersey you've just described, ended up on the other side of Europe or the world. So, you know, that's quite a catch, and it's difficult, as you say, to try and establish who wore the jersey, but a fine looking jersey nonetheless. Moving on, it couldn't get much more different on the second jersey of today's podcast. This is an away one that was introduced in 1989 and was worn right through to 1991. Talk to me about this yellow and green effort from Umbro.
Yeah, it's one of the first popular away strips that I clearly remember when it was released. Commonly known amongst a lot of fans as the Space Invaders strip, the yellow strip with the green arrows and lines appearing across the shoulders and below the sponsor at the bottom of the shirt as well.
It was described as that, but I do remember it being extremely popular. I remember Celtic wearing this jersey the week before the Scottish Cup final in 1989, and we were playing St Mirren at Love Street. It was during that period that we were informed that Maurice Johnston was signing for Celtic.
Yeah.
In fact, it might have been the day before this game at St Mirren. I remember it. We won 1-0, Joe Miller scored, and we were wearing this kit on that particular day. But you've seen loads and loads of fans also wearing these jerseys en route to Love Street that day from the cars and buses, etc. And I'll never forget, I did see someone wearing the away jersey with number 9 Johnston on the back, right? And then a few weeks later, after everything that had happened, and he defected to the dark side. Someone in the media tracked down this, I'm guessing it's the same fan, and interviewed him, and he was gutted, and he told his story in the paper, and he had his jersey, and I think he might have wanted a refund, but I'm not sure. And it just so happened that when we were doing the book on the Celtic jersey, one of the contributors, who shall remain nameless, was that man. It was that man who appeared in the paper, having had Johnston 9 on the back of his Celtic away jersey. I think it's well described as a Space Invaders effort. It's very much 1990s, Paul. You know, this is when these radical designs started being implemented, most notably by Umbro. But it's turned into a bit of an iconic cult classic. That design's been used. I've seen it on socks, I've seen it on beanie hats and that kind of thing. So it's turned into one of these nostalgic trips down memory lane. What's your thoughts on it looking back?
I always loved it. You know, it's just that bright yellow, you know, with the flashes of green in it. You know, just, again, it was something different. You know, it wasn't just a plain colour strip. There was detail to it, you know. You'd see the creativity starting to come out in the football shirt design, you know. It was quite a common template for Umbro to use at the time as well. There's a couple of international teams had the design as their away strip.
Did Wales have it?
Wales and Hungary had the identical ones. It was a white strip with a mixture of green and red arrows across the shoulders. And Sporting Lisbon, or Sporting Club de Portugal, to give them their Sunday name, they had it as an away strip as well. It was just white with the green arrows across the shoulder. And the unique thing with the Celtic one that's been used is it's the only version of it that has the detail on the lower part of the shirt. The rest of them only have the detail across the shoulders.
When you're describing it, I don't think I've actually seen the Sporting Lisbon effort, but to think of this kit as I'm looking at it at the moment in white and green, I think that would work absolutely perfectly.
I've only ever seen one of them. I know a Sporting shirt collector, and I've saw a picture of one in his collection. That's the only one I've ever seen.
These jerseys, I think when we were speaking about the other zigzag effort from the 1990s, it looked like the Rangers finances, it was just a zigzag that kept going down and down and down. That had been used obviously for various teams in different colour schemes, and no matter what colour scheme they used, it just still looked radical. This jersey, it was launched for Christmas 1988, and we started wearing it in the January of 1989. Up to that point, I think Celtic's relationship with Umbro in relation to away jerseys was pretty flawless when you think about it. You go back to the game we played in the Bernabeu in 1980, you know, that green one with the white floppy collar with the Umbro diamonds down the sleeves. Then you've got the white and the green pinstripe jerseys. I think the likes of McGarvey and Nicholas wearing them. The lime green jersey at Love Street in 1986. And then the yellow centenary shirts worn by the likes of McAvenny. I mean, the jerseys that they were producing were class. And then this came out, and I think it took everybody by surprise. With regards to your particular one, Paul, are you able to tell us, because I know that obviously the numbers were on the back, and they were really, really cool numbers, Umbro ones, if I remember right?
Yeah, it's the block detail with the small Umbro double diamond at the bottom of the numbers. It's a green felt, almost flock material that's made out of. The one I've got, it's a long sleeve version, and it's a number 14 on the back of it, so it would have been a substitute that they used. I've never been able to find any pictures of anyone wearing it. It's quite a tough one. There's very few pictures I can find of players actually wearing the long sleeve version in a game as well. Most of the time you see it's been short sleeves that they've wore. There are a few out there, but I've only seen first team numbers, never seen a number 14 being used.
So the search continues for this particular jersey then, Paul, from yourself. It is one of the difficulties, and I think, you know, probably part of the process, part of the fun for guys like yourself. And a radical departure for Umbro in the 1980s. They weren't put off by any reaction because they followed that up with another radical design. When we move on quite some time into our kit deal with Nike, again, mixed bag, but to be fair, when we're looking at the jerseys from the 2007-2008 season, Paul, we've got two absolute classics, don't we? Let's start off with the home jersey. Describe it to us.
The home jersey for this season was the 40th anniversary of Lisbon, so they've kept it really simple, the plain white round neck, the classic 6 hoops on it, and they added the extra embroidery detail marking the 40th anniversary around the club crest. Really looked really classy. You know, a lot of people really like this shirt for that extra bit of detail.
I do think it's one of the ones where we nod back to Lisbon on a specific anniversary. We did it on the 40th, we did it on the 50th, and long may that continue, Paul. We go back to the round neck, as you say, you know, the white round neck jersey, really simple, green and white hoops, nothing interfering with the design whatsoever. And then you have the gold embroidery around the crest and with the, you know, the Lisbon star above the four-leaf clover. It is one of the classic jerseys, and unfortunately only worn for one season. But the one that you have managed to locate is a very special shirt because it was a one-off and it was worn in a benefit match, wasn't it?
Yeah, beautiful green embroidery in the centre of the shirt, marking the Phil O'Donnell tribute match on the 25th of May 2008.
Now, that particular game was played between Celtic and Motherwell Selects. It was a full house at Celtic Park, glorious sunny day, and to actually track down and get one of these shirts, Paul, I'm guessing now it's quite difficult. Was it one of the occasions where after the game they were auctioned off to add to the charity funds?
I'm not aware of the shirts being auctioned off. This is another one I managed to persuade another collector to let go of. Again, it's one of the biggest things for when I started collecting. I've always loved the embroidered detail for any kind of one-off game on shirts. So whenever I get an opportunity to get one, whether it be a cup final or a testimonial or in this case a tribute match, you know, it's a no-brainer. If it comes up, you know, it's got to be had.
There was a couple of nice wee details. They didn't overdo it. You had the text around the actual badge itself, which denoted the date, Lions of Lisbon 40th anniversary. And then there was a very small patch to the bottom of the jersey, and you can tell me if this also appeared on the Matchworn ones, where it says, "For it's a grand old team to play for," and it was a quote, "The Tunnel, Estadio Nacional, 25th of May 1967, obviously as a reference to Bertie Auld war cry. Is that something that appeared on the Matchworn jerseys as well?
It's not on this one, no. It's not on the player version. And at the time when the Nike replicas were around, that's when I stopped buying shirts for myself. You know, I used to go buy them all the time every season, but the Nike changed when it was every year the new kits come out. That's when I stopped buying them, so I don't even have one to compare it with, you know.
Well, this was a jersey that obviously it was worn in the season which commemorated 40 years since Lisbon, and we did do the Lisbon Lions proud in the modern age by progressing to the last 16 of the Champions League, which in Scottish football terms is a massive achievement. And it was the second successive season we'd done that under Gordon Strachan. And you think of games like the victory against AC Milan at home when we won 2-1, and we were finally put out by Barcelona 4-2 on aggregate. But it was one of the jerseys as well that we won the league in, and it was the third in a row under Gordon Strachan. We won it on the final day of the season at Tannadice. That was just a few weeks after the passing of the great Tommy Burns. So it's a jersey with loads of history already attached to it, Paul. And looking back, it's a stunning looking shirt. Were you able to identify the wearer of this jersey in the Phil O'Donnell game?
Yeah, thankfully it's got a name and number on the back of it. It's number 22. It was worn by Tosh McKinley in a game, and the one I've got is autographed by him just below his name as well.
Tosh, a fan's favourite, a guy who came to Celtic really, really late in his career, didn't he? You always thought to yourself he was a Celtic player, a Celtic style player up and down that left. His left foot was like a wand. I always remember the cross for Big Van Hooijdonk, and I've met Tosh a few times. He's a good guy, and he's obviously still with the club, so that was a good catch for you, Paul. The away jerseys, we've spoken already about a very similar design that was done by Umbro, and it was worn in the cup final when Celtic beat Dunfermline, and it was the kind of bottle green and silver, and in many ways this is almost Nike's version of that jersey, isn't it?
Yep, it's barring a bit of style detail, it's almost identical. It's the exact same colourway. It's like a petrol green colour with a silver grey detail. It's on the collar and on the tips of the sleeves, and it's used in the detail for the Nike swoosh logo and highlighting the club badge on the shirt as well. It's
one of the things, I guess it comes down to personal opinion. I prefer the Nike version of this jersey. It was obvious they were looking down the history books of Celtic kits, and they'd done some of them really, really well. You know, they resurrected some of the designs really, really well. And this particular jersey, for me, it is a modern day classic. It looks classy even now looking at it. I can see from the picture you sent through, it's got the Champions League Starball embroidery, or is it embroidery, on the sleeve. Could you tell me which game it was played in?
Yeah, I got this shirt again, it came via another collector, lucky to get hold of it, and it was worn by Stephen Presley, number 17 on the back of it, and it was in the group stage game away to AC Milan that it was worn in.
Again, but we're going back to the territory of great Celtic runs under Gordon Strachan. You know, just obviously you've mentioned Stephen Presley there, another player that kind of divided opinion. Very much a Gordon Strachan signing, wasn't he? He was the type of player that suited Strachan, and but I think Presley always looks back on his time at Celtic really fondly. What was the name they gave to the three Hearts players that stood up to the old regime? The Gorgie Three or something, wasn't it?
Something like that, yeah.
And Celtic ended up signing all three of them: Paul Hartley, Craig Gordon, and Stephen Presley.
I was going to say, I mean, whenever I see this strip, the first player I think of is Paul Hartley scoring that away goal in the Champions League qualifier in Moscow. You know, it's just the first thing that comes to my mind whenever I see this kit.
But that's what these jerseys do. They just spark memories, Paul. And you know, I'm exactly like yourself. I'm thinking of Hartley, kind of drenched in sweat, you know, with the long hair, and that's who I would associate with this jersey. The home jersey that we've just spoken about, that was worn in the Phil O'Donnell game, I'm thinking Scott McDonald, probably because of the AC Milan goal, you know, at home. And the radical yellow and green away jersey, I'm thinking of players like Darius Jakinowski. I can remember Jackie wearing that jersey as well. So that's what these shirts do for you. What player do you associate with the home jersey from that season? The
home jersey, I mean, like you said, Scott McDonald always comes to mind. Very good at Hesselink as well. And weirdly, on today of all days, it reminds me, because it was 13 years ago the day that Bruni signed for Celtic, and this was the first season strip that he would have worn, 2007, 2008.
Yep, I remember him turning up at Celtic Park to be unveiled as what was a record signing between two Scottish clubs at that time. And he did the old thing that I spoke to Colin Watt about the other day. He just turned up in an old pair of jeans to sign for Celtic, you know. Back in the day, it used to be a case of getting your best tin flute on, you know. But times have changed, sometimes not for the better. 4 incredible jerseys from your collection, Paul. Just today, actually, I saw a version of the yellow away kit that you have introduced in the podcast today, and it didn't have a sponsor, but it was Matchworn. And the guy who owns it said it was worn in the reserves. It was worn by the reserve team, so they weren't wearing a sponsor.
I've seen early on in my collecting days, I remember seeing a version of this, and it actually had a green patch sewn over the C.R. Smith sponsor, and believe it was used the following year for reserve games. Obviously, the sponsor had changed, so they couldn't be running about wearing that. So rather than trying to remove it, they just put a green patch over it.
I can understand, obviously, because at that time, Celtic's home jerseys were given away to the reserve team, and then they would have gone down to the youth teams, and they would have been worn. And a lot of the jerseys were given away as well. So we've got rid of the jersey, and the first team are no longer wearing it, but obviously the reserves are. But instead of putting a yellow patch on, Paul, they've put a big green one on. You know, just if you put a yellow one on, then at least it would have hidden the fact that you've stuck a big patch on it. The other occasion where I remember, rather than producing a new kit without a sponsor, you know, Celtic had the Carling, and it was more or less a black patch in the European game as well. You remember that?
Yep,
And
one of the games in France.
It's all down to the branding with regards to legislation around alcohol branding on jerseys, isn't it? But these are the things that then create really sought after items for Matchworn collectors. And the one fairly recently that I don't think I've discussed with you is when we were playing that friendly game and the jerseys didn't turn up in time, so you could see that Celtic were wearing a training shirt and they had the yellow numbers on the back, no names.
Pre-season friendly at the beginning of this season.
Yes.
I think it was St. Gallen.
That's right. Now, the thing with that, Paul, is instantly every one of those jerseys becomes totally sought after. Have you ever seen any of those turning up?
No, definitely not. I've never seen any of them. I'm sure they've probably been kept under lock and key now. You would hope that the club have got wise to the fact that these things are part of the history. And this is what I go back to my very original point. You know, Celtic are now at a stage where we're talking about having a museum, Paul. And in that museum, there's a lot of space to fill. We should have an incredible collection of photographs, for example. I mean, we've ran
a club newspaper since 1965, and right up until the days of agency photographs, Celtic employed a photographer to take the pictures. So we had thousands upon thousands of images that have not been kept. That breaks my heart. That's history. That's history in a skip, you know. And then you've got things like, as I said before, contracts, Celtic views, meeting minutes, jerseys. You should have one design of every jersey in the club's history. Now, I know that when you go pre-1930s, it's getting a bit hazy because jerseys weren't seen as something that would become a valuable asset to a club, but it was always going to be part of history. Have you ever given any thought to where the very, very early jersey collections might be?
Oh, it's mind-boggling when you try and think of these kind of things, you know. You would love to think that there was maybe one or two of them still out there somewhere, whether it would be with family or former players or former custodians of the club, board members or whatever, whether they're still around or not over 100 years later, you know. I've seen really old versions of other club shirts from those kind of time periods, but I've no idea if there are any Celtic versions still in existence.
It's something that came to my mind fairly regularly, Paul, when I was doing the book, and I'm of the opinion that there will be a discovery at some stage, and it's probably within one of the families who were involved in the running of the club for generations and generations, who will have a collection stored away somewhere, stashed away in a loft, and at some point we'll be able to enjoy that. Having spoke to virtually all the collectors out there during the making of that book itself, no one seems to have much knowledge. There's the odd player now and again whose great-grandson might have a jersey stashed away, but there's no real early collections, which is unfortunate. Now, Paul, you've regaled us with another 4 jerseys from your collection. If we want to see more, where can we find you online?
All the shirts featured again this week and any other ones can all be found at www.mycelticshirts.co.uk.
Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to going through your match-worn wardrobe again next week. Take care now.
Cheers, Paul. See you later.
Thanks, Paul.